Humanity is male, and man defines woman not in herself, but in relation to himself. She is not considered an autonomous being. She is the inessential in front of the essential. He is the subject, he is the absolute, she is the other. This is not a recent invention. Every group defines itself by setting up an opposite. A village sees the next village as other. A nation sees foreigners as other. But in every other case, the opposition is reciprocal. The foreigner can look back and call you foreign. The slave can revolt and make the master the other. Women cannot do this. They are dispersed, living among men, tied to individual men by home, family, children. They have never said we. They have taken nothing. They have received. And that is the fundamental problem I intend to examine. I will not pretend that the body is irrelevant. It is not. From puberty onward, the woman's body becomes something that happens to her, something she did not choose and must carry. Every month, blood. Every possible pregnancy, a risk she bears alone. Menopause, the end of fertility, announced as a loss, experienced as a kind of social dying. None of this is invented. But, and this is the essential point, none of this determines her destiny. Biology is not destiny. What society does with these biological facts is destiny. The Anglo-Saxons call menstruation the curse. That word is not biology. That word is a judgment, a value placed on a fact. And that value has been placed there consistently by men who do not experience it and who have everything to gain from treating it as a defect. Woman's body is not a prison. It has been made into one, and the walls were built by others, not by nature. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. No biological, psychic, or economic destiny defines the figure that the human female takes on in society. It is civilization as a whole that elaborates this product between the male and the eunuch that is called feminine. Up to the age of 12, the girl is just as strong, just as intellectually capable as her brother. Then something happens, not in her body, in the world around her. She is given a doll while he is given a toy that moves through space. She is told to sit still while he is told to run. She is dressed in clothes that forbid climbing. She is praised for being pretty. He is praised for being strong. This is not nature, this is instruction, repeated daily from the moment of birth. The passivity that characterized the so-called feminine woman is not a trait she was born with. It is a destiny that was imposed on her. And she was so young when it began that she mistook it for herself. Every human being has a fundamental need to surpass themselves, to reach beyond what they already are, to build, to create, to project themselves into the future. I call this transcendence. When that surpassing is blocked, when existence is frozen into pure repetition, pure maintenance, pure sameness, it becomes immanence, and immanence is a degradation, not a vocation, an oppression. Now look at the life society has prepared for woman. She cleans the house, it gets dirty again. She cooks the meal, it is eaten, and tomorrow she cooks again. She raises the children, they grow and leave. None of this produces anything that lasts. None of it opens a future. She maintains, she repeats, she preserves. While he invents, builds, and reaches, this is not the natural division of existence. This is a political arrangement, one that serves the man and imprisons the woman. Every time transcendence is forced into immanence, it is an absolute evil. It does not matter whether the subject consents to it. The evil is the same. The destiny that society traditionally offers women is marriage. Boys marry, they take a wife. Girls are married, given by their parents, integrated into the husband's world, taking his name, his class, his home, his religion. She follows where his work takes him. She breaks with her past. She is annexed into his universe. In the most honest terms, she is treated as a vassal. And now she faces a conflict that has no clean resolution. She wants to be a full human being, to work, to create, to act in the world. But every step she takes toward that life is judged against her femininity. If she succeeds professionally, she is told she is unwomanly. If she is too feminine, she is told she is not serious. Man has no such conflict. His success confirms his masculinity. Hers threatens it. This is not a personal problem. It is not solved by finding the right man. It is a structural condition, and it will not change until the structure does. It is through work that woman has been able, to a large extent, to close the gap that separates her from the male. Work alone can guarantee her concrete freedom. The moment she ceases to be a parasite, when she is no longer economically dependent on a man, the system based on her dependence begins to collapse, not through revolution, not through hatred of men, through the simple radical act of becoming a subject rather than an object, of taking on projects, of building a future of her own. The fact of being a human being is infinitely more important than all the singularities that distinguish human beings from each other. The same drama of flesh and spirit, of finitude and transcendence, plays itself out in both sexes. Both are eaten away by time, both are stalked by death, both have the same essential need of the other, and both can take the same glory from their freedom. Woman is the victim of no mysterious fate. The singularities that make her different derive their importance only from the meaning applied to them. Change the meaning, and you change the world. It will not be easy, but it is possible, and it is necessary.